Hello, mares and gentlecolts. It is your friendly neighborhood Toby, and today I shall be doing a read-through of the fan fiction Ships That Pass in the Night by my favorite, Ebonmain. Without further ado, we begin. Twilight Sparkle watched the last orange rays of dusk fade. When night had well and truly fallen, she turned with a sigh and began preparations to close the library for the night. When she'd first taken on a role as librarian to Ponyville, she'd only kept the library open till about mid-afternoon. See, these hours had generally been sufficient, as the library was never very busy, catering mostly to young ponies studying and adult ponies that wanted a new piece of fiction every few weeks or so. In the past few months, however, Twilight had kept the doors open late, all for one special customer. He came every few days, like clockwork, to return the book he'd checked out on his last trip. Inevitably, he would spend a few minutes wandering around the library, pursuing the shelves, deciding on what book to check out, and he always checked out at least one, every trip. Usually they'd exchange a few words, greetings, pleasantries, the occasional jest. Twilight spent most of the time he was in the library trying not to watch him, and it was difficult. He would end up leaving well after dark. Twilight did not blame him for that. She knew that work on the farm didn't end till near sunset, and the trip from Sweet Apple Acres was a long one. Twilight never regretted working a few extra hours to wait for Big Macintosh. Seeing the red stallion walk into the library was the high point of Twilight's days. She didn't know what about him attracted her so much. Perhaps it was how safe he made her feel. Intellectually, she knew her magic was more powerful response to any threat than anything an Earth pony could have done. Still, there was something about his towering presence and the timbre of his voice that made Twilight feel like when Big Mac was around, nothing bad could ever happen and nothing could possibly harm her. Perhaps it was the words they shared. His greetings swelled Twilight's heart, and his jokes never failed to make her laugh. And perhaps the attraction was more physical than she would have cared to admit. Long days on the farm had given Big Mac an impressive musculature. But whatever it was, Twilight could not deny its effect on her. Butterflies had invaded her stomach in anticipation of seeing him. Eventually, as she had hoped, he arrived. He said his greetings, he returned his book. He asked about her day, he made a few jokes. The conversation was a blur in Twilight's mind. He lingered in the library, checking each of the sections before finally selecting a tome to take home. He brought it to her so she could check it out, and she took it from him with magic, made a few marks in the logbook with a quill, and surreptitiously slipped in a note before levitating the book into his saddlebag. Then, as quickly as he had come, he was gone. That was always the worst part of Twilight's days. As she locked the door, she thought of the note. All her feelings for him spilled out on paper. This was her third note to him. Twilight suspected that he ignored the first two notes, but desperately hoped that it wasn't so. She thought that ignoring the notes might be his way of letting her down easy. She knew she would have been devastated if he'd simply told her outright that the feelings were not mutual. With a heavy heart, she decided that this would be her last note to him. If he didn't respond to this one, she'd accept that they weren't meant to be and try to get on with life without him, however hard she expected that to be. Big Macintosh berated himself for his cowardice. It was just the same as every other time he'd gone to the library. He'd entered ready to declare his feelings for Twilight Sparkle, but his courage had fled him as soon as he saw her. He forced himself to make small talk, feeling like the most awkward pony ever to walk the face of Equestria. He'd managed to return the book he'd checked out on his last unsuccessful attempt at asking out the unicorn of his dreams. In all that he had accomplished, he'd failed to gather the determination necessary to attempt a confession, and puttered about the library for a few times, trying not to stare at Twilight, before finally grabbing a book at random and checking it out. The comedy of errors had been the highlight of his day, as it always was, but it left him practically kicking himself for his failure. He took one last look at the library, barely lit by the newly risen moon, before turning to walk toward Sweet Apple Acres. The walk home was inevitably the worst part of Big Mac's stay, as the stallion was alone with his failure and with his regrets. Big Macintosh's only comfort was the weight of the book in his saddlebags. The book gave him a good reason to come back and test his courage again in a few days, though that's the only good he'd get out of it. Big Mac never read the books he'd check out from the library, and between his trips, they sat in his saddlebags unopened, gathering dust. He'd never so much as cracked a single one.